Good evening, everybody. If you can join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, we're starting our council meeting for January 20th. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Thank you, everyone. All council members are present except for Councilmember Andy Reum. He is absent and excused this evening. Any comments on tonight's agenda? Councilmember Sandberg.
I'd like to pull the December 9th minutes, please.
Okay. Any other items? No? Sister?
I'd like to pull 15009.
Okay. Any other items for tonight's meeting agenda? Changes, additions, subtractions, or otherwise? All right, seeing none. We do have a special presentation this evening. Melissa Yang from the King County Conservation District is here. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Actually, my name is Melissa Lang.
Oh,
and
so
that's
sorry.
Okay. And I'm with King Conservation District. I'm the outreach coordinator, and it's been my job for the better part of the last year to go around to city councils and introduce or reacquaint councils with King Conservation District and what we have been doing. So I'm going to tell you a brief story, abridged story this evening, and I have a PowerPoint with a lot of notes that's kind of the full story. You can read along with that. But this story I'm actually going to start in the middle. So let me figure out how to do this here.
I hate to bother you. Is the little green light on your microphone on?
Yes.
Okay,
Am I
good.
not close enough?
Well, I can hear you. I just don't.
Okay,
It doesn't sound like
we'll
it's
do
coming
that.
over the speaker. Thanks.
So this story starts in the middle on November 17th when the Metro King County Council voted to approve King Conservation District's 2015 program of work and our funding rate structure. And this was the culmination of about 20 months worth of work that started back in April of 2013, where the county asked us to co-convene two complementary task force committees, including a conservation panel and a task force. And we were charged with the task of identifying natural resource priorities, and 100 were identified. And from those 100, it was boiled down to 6 that King Conservation District was uniquely equipped to address. And the short version of this is it boils down to work around food farms, trees, and water. So from those two committees, an advisory committee was created. Let's see, why am I going forward here? One moment. I've lost my ability to, oh, there we go. An advisory committee was formulated, and this advisory committee was made up of representatives from King County, City of Seattle, City of Bellevue. There were places that were designated for Sound Cities Association representatives. We had urban and rural landowners, and then folks from the from NGOs representing equity and social justice. So this was a very robust meeting schedule, and these folks were charged with helping us come up with a program of work that we needed to submit to King County on August 1st. We met real regularly, sometimes 3-4 times a month, and on July 9th, the SCA membership voted to approve the program of work, and then it was submitted to King County Council. After our approval, we developed an implementation plan to take that program of work, and this is a 5-year implementation plan that shows an additional $3 million worth of new investment money around these regional national resource management priorities. So once again, going with food, trees, and water, These have been the areas that we are working with. We're working to expand the region's green infrastructure on private lands, to build a sustainable and resilient food system that will be in support of agriculture, and to restore private shorelines along fresh and marine shores. So in our rural and urban tree canopy work, we will be working with landowners who have parcels smaller than 5 acres, because King County has a program to work with the larger landowners. And then also within the urban areas, working with residents and cities to increase street canopy, remove invasives, and increase just the green canopy around the cities in the urban areas. In the regional food system, we have about $900,000 worth of grant money that's available. One statistic that's interesting to note is that King County farmers produce only $120 million of the $600 million of raw foods that are consumed in King County. So there is a lot of area there where King County farmers, a lot of market share that they're missing out on. And then in shoreline and riparian habitat, we know that 2/3 of King County marine and freshwater shoreline is owned by private landowners. So getting education to them through workshops, technical assistance, implementation, and cost share is one of the ways that we will help protect the shorelines. So as we go forward in our new program of work and add these new programs, we still have programs that we have traditionally been known for, and that includes free soil testing for every citizen within King Counties in our member jurisdictions. We have cost share programs around fencing off, you can see off of wetland areas, pasture management. We have workshops, and we have technical assistance. So as we continue to collaborate with member jurisdictions, we are asking, particularly the City of Bothell, how we could help you meet the goals of providing your citizens access to local healthy food, a vibrant urban and rural forest canopy, and improved water quality. So I know here in Bothell, you have used your member jurisdictional grant money to help support the Parr Creek restoration project. And just on Monday, you had a volunteer event where you had 30 volunteers come out and replant or remove invasives from the work that's been done there. And that's been a great project, and one that we really herald as a great example of working with private citizens on a public property. You guys have done a great job in rallying forces to come out and maintain that property, and that's been great. So I just want to call attention to, in your little folder that I've given you here, on the left-hand side, this is a funding sheet that shows the money that's been invested in the Bothell area through either incentive programs, conservation services, or member jurisdiction grants. Stapled into the middle is our implementation plan, and it is showing our programs around those 6 areas, benchmarks, FTE, budgets, and what we intend to accomplish in the next 5 years. And then towards the back, I looked at bringing up my Facebook page, but I'm sure you guys don't want to see pictures of my cat. So if you go to Facebook King Conservation District, you'll see we just today did a nice spread on the Parr Creek Volunteer Project, and you can like us and comment on that if you happen to know anyone or the organizations that were involved in that. And also, again, just showing you some of our established programs, our landowner incentive program, soil testing. We'll be bringing to King County forest stewardship coached planning through WSU. And then there is also a list of farm tours and workshops that we'll be offering this winter and spring. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Great. So I certainly do.
Okay.
Curious, you mentioned that you were working on buffer restoration.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we have the Sammamish River / slough that runs through the city of Bothell, a lot of attention there. They've been compromised over the years with blackberry bushes, thanks to some Brit who brought them over 100 years ago.
Right.
But are you working with individual landowners in the sense that you're giving them money for plants, or how is it, what form are you working with property owners?
So we will do workshop, and it's tailored to what would best fit your jurisdiction. If you would like workshops to educate citizens about, not buying English ivy or how to remove those invasives, we can do that. We do offer landowner incentive programs about replanting that area once the invasives have been brought out. We're actually on the 28th of February having our annual native plant sale, where we have native plants at a very discounted rate, and you can find information that on your Facebook page. And actually within the city, your member jurisdictional grant money can be used as a credit towards that, just straight across.
What kind of incentives would a private property owner receive?
So they would receive just technical assistance and, information on how to remove those invasives and how to replant and how to maintain that. So,
What kind of volunteer crew can you mobilize if somebody's like, have free reign at my quarter mile or whatever it would be?
That would be great, yeah. So, as other jurisdictions have done, we've worked strongly with like friends of groups or different conservation groups within the city that are interested in that. And oftentimes it's, like a Parr Creek kind of project that starts out, and then those neighboring properties say, we want to be involved too, and so we can move out into those private landowners and help them with that. We've got a big project in West Seattle where there was a public property that was just overrun with invasives. And several times, different groups have gone in and removed those. But until they were able to get the surrounding private landowners to also do work, it just kept coming back. And now it's made a huge difference in that public property is staying clear because the private property surrounding it is,
Yeah, I'd be really interested to sit down with you and hear a little bit more directly what plans have already been implemented and what we could do. So I have your email here.
Definitely.
Melissa Lang at King. Okay. So I'll send you an email and hopefully we can set up a time. Second question I have in regards to the farm programs. I actually went to Canyon Hills Community Church, which is in the city of Bothell. They have a food bank there every week, which is incredible, the amount that they give to, I think, 150 families to help support them.
Great.
Well, while there, I met another two people who are running a program to create farms. And these farms are such that people can come to them, they can work for the week, and at the end of the week they get a box of vegetables. So it's teaching them, not just giving them food, but it's teaching them how to grow and cultivate and ultimately see the reward at the end of the week. I heard you mention that you have somewhat of a program like this as well. What does that look like?
So we have a number of different things. We sponsor a number of food farmers markets in the area. City of Des Moines is recently, with their farmers market, applied for a grant to offer vouchers to low-income seniors and handicapped folks. And so they can come get a $10 voucher and then spend that at the farmers market. So that's one way we encourage folks. We do a lot of work with food banks also, encouraging kind of that gleaning and having farmers bring extra food. But you're kind of talking about the incubating farms, and that's something that, we need to, the average age of a farmer in King County is 65. So who's going to grow our food in a few decades? So we are very interested in working with groups that are interested in incubating and educating the next generation of farmers. So as I mentioned, we have about $900,000 worth of grant money, and that would be the kind of program that we would like to see funds go to help them encourage people to learn how to farm. As our county changes, we have historically been a rural support organization, and you'll always be able to rent a manure spreader from King Conservation District. But as our population in the county is more urbanized and more centralized in the urban areas, we really realize we have to deal, if we want to be good stewards of our land, that's who we have to target in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we have to raise the next generation of farmers. So
It's
yeah.
really interesting.
So did that answer your question? I mean,
It absolutely did.
Okay.
I mean, so many government is often looked at that we're trying to control land through legislation, which is not a real positive when you think about it. But what you're doing here
Right.
of incentivizing private landowners to improve their land and
Exactly.
otherwise through other farming measures, the other arm of what you're doing, I think is
Yeah.
very interesting.
And,
So I'd like
and
to-
we're non-regulatory. We carry no big stick. So we're a trusted source for people to come to help them be able to manage their land and use their land in a way that meets those regulations in often very creative ways. And so that's been a good end
You
for
might have
us.
more questions. Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you for your presentation. I don't have a question. I just wanted to describe to people who might be listening, if they don't know where Parr Creek is, they probably have walked by it many, many times. And it's located in the North Creek Business Park. And if you're walking on the trail kind of behind the YMCA and then heading south past the ball fields, that's Parr Creek. And if you walk there, you'll see the very active restoration project that's underway. And I would just like to recognize and thank Janet Gear, who's in our Public Works Department, and she's the one who organized this community planting for Parr Creek for Martin Luther King Day of Service. So
And
thanks
the
to Janet.
Montessori school that is in your, is that?
Right.
They received our conservation partnership award last year for their work with that.
Great.
So, yeah, so it's been a great example of how the community can come together.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well,
Alyssa,
thank you very much.
so much for your presentation this
Okay.
evening. Enjoy your evening at home. Next item on the agenda is our projected agenda. We did get a copy of it tonight. Everybody get a chance to look over that. Any changes? Councilmember Sandberg?
I wanted to thank staff for adding dates in it's our first meetings of March, April, May, and June for comprehensive plan update. So that's now on our projected agenda, and thank you for doing that.
Nobody else? Next on the agenda is our visitor section. This is an opportunity for the public to address council. We do allocate a 3-minute time for your opportunity to speak. I do have 2 sign-ups, and at the end of it, I'll give others the opportunity. First on our sign-up sheet is David Habelwitz. Hobelwitz. Perfect. And we have your address, so no need to give it again.
I wanted to share some photos with you, if I may.
I'm not confident with our ability to do so.
No? Oh, no.
Just want to make sure, Mr. Habelwitz, I assume that they are, what are the pictures of?
These are pictures of the road.
Okay.
That's
I would have assumed that they would have been fully appropriate. I'd just like to get that clarification.
It's close. It's not going to
Yeah,
work,
it's-
though. I can
it's-
tell just because it's not. I'll be happy to share them with you via email later for
Yeah.
value.
Perfect.
So I'm here to talk about, there's another pothole on the road on, it's Holly Hills Drive that goes behind the Seattle Times building.
Sure.
And I've been here to talk about this before, but just to reiterate that there are more potholes there. And I believe that they've been repaired every month since at least August. There has been somebody coming out there to repair the potholes. And in fact, see if any of these are going to show for you very well. There you go. So you can see right here, there's a big pothole that's already starting. The one in the middle there is actually a pothole that's come out where the repavement didn't stick. Repairs on top of repairs. There's about 4 patches right there in that one spot. So it's over and over. that kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea of the extent of it, because that whole section of road, it's not just a small spot, but it's the entire road in this area. Lastly, this is the shoulder of the road, and this time of year, we've actually been very dry lately, but that is mud, and you can actually see those are tire tracks that are going through there from when the cars go off the road there for whatever reason. And that's where the pedestrians have to walk. And unfortunately, this time of year, you really can't make use of that because of that. Because if it's not that, in the summer, it's blackberries. Again, another picture of the shoulder. Yes, I do play. This is taken the picture actually from Google Maps, where they show the car cam, and that's a runner on the side of the road because they have no place else to run. And this, I actually talked with her. It's a grandmother. You can't see it well there, but when you look at the slide, I can tell you that it's a grandmother pushing a child in a stroller on the road, and there's no other place. At least she's facing oncoming traffic, but that's her only choice. And the neighborhood that this attaches to, Holly Hills, it is the trailer park neighborhood, so a lot of people there don't even own cars. I live in the next neighborhood down in Pioneer Hills. There are two more neighborhoods there, Morningside, and then the new one that was recently annexed. All of these neighborhoods, this is their only connection to the city of Bothell. There's one, oh no.
You just want to take 15 seconds to wrap up?
Yes.
Great.
The point is, if you can spend money on that last spot in the North Creek Park Business Park to pave, can we please spend money on this road and at least get it paved? And I know there's a sidewalk thing that maybe we'll get a sidewalk in there, but these are critical for us. I'm just asking more than 1,000 households in that area, 3,000 or more people, 10% of the population of Bothell, something like that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hubblewitz. I think I got it right the second time, I hope. Have a good evening. Next on the sign-up sheet is Sandy Gwynn. Ms. Gwynn, nice to see you again.
Good evening. Regional Fire Authority. Bothell City Manager provided a memo dated January 15, 2015 to the Regional Fire Authority Subcommittee regarding RFA tax impact analysis. I will email you a copy of this memo. Currently, Bothell citizens pay for Bothell Fire Services through the city tax on their property tax bill, as well as with other fees and taxes. Bothell City Manager has determined that what Bothell citizens pay for their fire services is equivalent to a levy rate of $1.09 per thousand valuation. With an RFA, add the charge of $1.45 per thousand valuation to the $1.09. This is $2.54 if the RFA is not made revenue neutral. Example for a $400,000 home or business, $1.09 on $400,000 home equals $436 a year. $436 is the current cost for today's fire services. $1.09 plus $1.45 RFA charge equals $2.54. $2.54 on a $400,000 home is $1,016 a year for fire services that a property owner would pay. $436 versus $1.16 for fire services if not made revenue neutral. If the RFA goes for a vote and passes, the city tax is still on the property tax bill in addition to the new RFA tax. The RFA area being discussed consists of Fire District 10, North Shore Fire District, Woodinville Fire District, and City of Bothell. The reason I do not believe the RFA is fair unless you ask Bothell residents first is because the registered voters that live in the fire districts outnumber Bothell residents, plus Woodinville and North Shore will have their taxes lowered with an RFA. Possibilities to consider on your budget issues that you're having at your retreat. One would be to have an honest discussion with your citizens about the budget issues you're having. Two, and I previously mentioned this, identify your critical employee positions, and through attrition, do not hire non-critical positions. 3, consider a bond if you need a new fire station or a fire operations levy. Bothell residents support their police and fire. We will work with you, but it's got to be fair to Bothell residents. In 2007, 2008, there were 287.56 full-time equivalents. In 2014, there were 312 full-time equivalents. This is at a time when a lot of businesses and cities reduced. Just something to consider at your retreat. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. Nice to see you. Oh, you might have a question, if you wouldn't mind.
I have a question. Thank you.
I thought I could escape this time.
I know. So you had a lot of numbers for us.
It's in a memo.
Is it in? Are you going to be given?
I will email it to you. I was too late to copy it at home, and I didn't want to miss the sign-up time and miss the ability to speak. But it is a memo that the city manager presented to the, I believe it was the Finance Subcommittee, RFA.
And so, I guess I'm trying to understand what you're trying to tell us. So, in that memo, currently, City of Bothell residents pay. It's valued at $1.09 per $1,000 valuation.
It's like a $1.085 something.
Okay.
But actually, the city manager could probably answer your questions on the memo better than I can, because I'm still trying to digest it, but that's the gist that I got from it.
Okay, I guess I'll just wait for the memo.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy, another question. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out, Sandy. Good to see you. I wasn't at that meeting. I had to be at my job. Did that dollar, we'll round it off, $1.09 per thousand, did that include the replacement funds for fire apparatus and and other capital expenses in that, or was that just an operating cost?
That is, I can read it in fine print, or the city manager can respond. The first small wording was expenditure figures include full CRR and public ed / PIO and emergency preparedness program costs. Fee revenue figures do not include Bothell EMS or property tax receipts. Future facility additions would require voter approval. And I do have a call into the finance director because I have some questions on this too.
So that doesn't include the Snohomish County EMS levy. It includes all of our fire prevention and emergency preparedness folks. But what I'm hearing is it doesn't include any type of reserve fund or capital replacement costs in that wouldn't be a true and accurate. You would probably have to bump that up and be a little closer to the fire districts then. Wouldn't you agree?
Right now they're discussing, there were different scenarios, and one scenario that the Finance Committee did not approve, but they submitted to go forward, was...
No. I'm talking about Bothell. It doesn't.
Well, this
figure
does
doesn't include those. Is what I'm getting at.
This figure that I have, because again, I work during the day and I can't attend all the subcommittees, so I get little bits and pieces. And the piece that I picked up from the Finance Committee is they were asking for Bothell to come up with $1.5 million.
That's not my question. My question
I don't know if that $1.5 million includes what you're asking. And again, I would recommend asking the city manager for that, because he's the one who did the analysis and put the memo together that I'm still trying to understand.
Okay. So I guess my question would be, does that $1.09 include capital replacement accounts, capital accounts, and a reserve?
It doesn't include any reserve attached to our general fund. It also includes the revenue that we received as an offset from Fire District 10. obviously our property tax levies are not $1.09. The purpose of that memo was to refute the need for Bothell to contribute $1.5 million to an RFA. That's really the only purpose of that memorandum, wasn't to compare our property tax. Because our property tax is a much higher amount that we levy upon the residents of Bothell, but when you take into account the revenue that we receive from Fire District 10, of course we provide service to them, it drops it to equivalent down to $1.09.
Okay, so it sounds like in the city itself, if we didn't have that, we would have a higher per capita cost to operate our fire department.
If we did not have, if we weren't able to recover some of the revenue due to the expense associated with providing services to Fire District 10, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I think that's the end of the questions. Anybody else from the public like to address council this evening? No? Great, thank you for coming out. Next item on our agenda actually is the consent agenda, which currently, as remains, would be December 16th council meeting minutes and AB 15008. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So there's a motion and second to pass those two items. If everybody could place their vote. And clerk display passes unanimously with Councilmember Rayum absent and excused. Councilmember Sandberg, you pulled the December 9th minutes.
Yes, thank you. On page 7 of our agenda packet, about a third to the half of the way down the page, so this is page 3 of 3 of the December 9th meeting minutes.
Sure.
There's a bold heading that says amendment, vote on the amendment, vote on the main motion.
Mm-hmm.
So right after that, I would like it to read, to add the sentence, Councilmember Sandberg spoke to her abstention.
Okay, you going to make a motion?
I'd like to move that amendment.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Nope. The motion would be to pass, well, let me,
The minutes as amended?
that's your motion.
December 9th
Thank you.
minutes as
Okay.
amended.
Perfect. Everybody can place their vote. The clerk display. Perfect. Thank you. Those pass. Next item that was pulled was AB 15009. Councilmember Agnew, you pulled that.
After some consulting and deliberation, Councilmember Sandberg asked if she could take my spot in the Sound Cities Association, and I have no objections to that at all.
Okay, let me get to that page. The Public Issues Committee.
Right.
And so would you be, oh, and Rayum would remain the alternate? And Sandberg would now become the designated appointee?
Right.
I assume she's in support. Great. Any other changes to this? So would you like to make a motion?
Motion passes amended.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, if you could place your vote. Your clerk display passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Next item is AB 15010. Consider approval of professional service agreement with CM Design Group for design of the 2015 pavement preservations project. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Freed, members of the council. I'm here before you to bring the approval of the professional services contract for the 2015 pavement overlay project, the local funding. The 2015 pavement preservation project will repair and extend the life of 3 streets, 120th Avenue Northeast and North Creek Parkway North, and a portion of North Creek Parkway South. CM's design group was selected for the design portion of this through a review of the qualifications and an interview. The work will include a recommendation on the type of repair and preservation, design of the pavement section and curb ramps, and preparation of the contract documents. There was several questions presented to staff before tonight's meeting. Those responses have been circulated. If there's any follow-up questions or additional questions.
Do you have any questions, Tris, at all? Were Were you the one that, I think you were the ones that submitted on this one.
No, I don't have any.
Does anybody else have additional questions for Jason? Yeah.
You mentioned curb ramps. Is there also ADA access at the intersections? Are those ramps being changed too? And I know that I've seen that happen in some of our other projects, so I didn't know if it was part of this project or not.
Yeah, as part of the ADA requirements, we're required to bring all the ADA ramps up to current standards when we do certain types of preservation projects. So when we do overlays, we're required to bring the facilities up to current standards. When we do other types of maintenance programs, the standards are somewhat lower. But yes, we'll be upgrading ADA ramps and sidewalks.
In that area, then?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move with recommended action.
Any discussion?
I'd like to make an amending motion.
Councilmember Sandberg?
I'd like to make an amending motion to allocate design dollars such that we would use approximately $330,000 of funding from the Bright Water mitigation towards pavement preservation in this area, and then redirect the remaining design costs and future projected $1 million construction costs to other pavement projects in the city. And if I get a second, I'll speak to my motion.
Do you have another motion or amendment?
Nope.
No. Okay. Any other discussion on the underlying motion?
Can I speak my opposition then?
You absolutely can.
If
You
there are
still
no
have the
more,
floor.
if there are no more amending motions, okay. So I'm going to vote no on this this design contract. We are being asked to approve about $67,000 to design a repavement project in the North Creek Business Park. And I asked several questions today, and thank you to staff for responding to me. My main concern is that we have received comments from citizens throughout the city about the condition of their roads. We heard tonight from a citizen about Holly Hills Drive. We've recently heard about the conditions of the road on Northeast 188 leading to Pop Keeney Stadium. We've heard about conditions of road in Snohomish County. And so I feel that we have other priorities to meet in the city before dedicating additional funds for more repaving in the North Creek Business Park. We've already repaved several of the streets in the North Creek Business Park. And so in the staff's response to some of my questions, I asked, were any of these funds constrained? And I'm speaking about the $66,000 design and the approximate $1 million in construction needed to complete the design. And they said the funds could be used on other pavement projects in the city. However, approximately $330,000 of the funding is from Bright Water mitigation, intended to use on the roadways around the Bright Water plant, hence my amending motion. I feel as though we have so many streets in this city that are in serious need of repair. We have places in the city where people don't have sidewalks, don't have crosswalks, and yet we are spending money to redesign crosswalks that are already there. And so I am voting against this because I feel like we have other priorities that we need to meet, other requests that we have heard several times from our citizens.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Wrap up comments? Yep, Councilmember Evans.
Appreciate those comments. I will be voting for this. And you're right, we do hear from a lot of citizens on roads and sidewalks and things in this city, and that is obviously one of our key discussion topics at our upcoming retreat. There's not an easy answer to these questions, but we're going to work on them and see what we can come up with. But I trust that the staff, I know that the staff has a detailed process they go through in evaluating these roadways and things, and which are the priorities. And there's a lot of priorities, but there's the highest priorities or whatever the case may be. And so I trust the staff has gone through a process to determine which streets are the best to be paved, and with the money that's available, and that those others will be considered as we continue to look at the alternatives for funding. So I wish there were more money to do more of this work, and maybe there will be. Maybe we'll find some way to do this. But at least at this time, I appreciate what the process they've gone through, and I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
I just want to thank staff for their work on this. I think these are good projects. They're ones that need to be resurfaced. It is a reality of our situation economically that we don't have enough money to do all of the sidewalks in the city or all of the roads in the city. That's true of most jurisdictions. That was one of the reasons that I think a majority of the council wanted to see Proposition 1 pass and put that out for the voters, so that we could have some special projects that would have additional revenues devoted to that, and it would free up funds in our general fund to be able to address matters such as this. That didn't pass, and so I think what we have to do is go through a very methodical process of what needs to be done in our city, what the resources we have, and then apply it to both. And I think the staff has done a very thoughtful and very deliberate job, taking into account all of the needs of all of the citizens, not just one particular neighborhood or one particular individual, and balancing those against the resources that we have. It's not easy, and I appreciate the work that you guys put into it, and I'll be supporting the proposed action tonight.
Great, thank you. So I also will be supporting the underlying motion. The second a new road is paved, it creates degradation. It starts to degrade and starts to age, right? And so when we're laying new roads, we're immediately creating a new need in the future. And it is absolutely true throughout our city there are needs for sidewalks and roads and preservation. I've heard Councilmember Rayum talk about the need for a pavement preservation program, and so this is certainly a step in that direction. I think this council, as a majority, most likely will support that tonight. Do you have any comments? No comments. Everybody could place their vote. The underlying motion was moved by Deputy Mayor Spivey, seconded by Councilmember Evans. And the clerk can display. Passes 5-1 with Councilmember Rayum absent and excused. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is AB 15011. Consider approval of Providence Community Corrections contract for probation services. And TJ, nice to see you, sir. You have a presentation for us, I understand.
I don't have a presentation.
Oh.
A brief description.
A brief briefing.
Good evening. You're right. Good evening, Mayor Freed, Deputy Mayor Spivey, and members of the Bothell City Council. I am TJ Keogh, the Court Administrator for the City of Bothell Municipal Court. I'm appearing tonight on behalf of the court to request that you approve the professional services agreement with Providence Community Corrections. Providence provides probation services for courts. I would also like to introduce you to Stacy Scarpacci, the State Director for Providence Community Corrections. We would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
You have the award for the fastest presentation ever. That's just fine. Any questions for TJ?
I had one.
Councilmember Lamb, and then Councilmember Evans.
So, TJ, I understand the idea that we save a significant amount of money by contracting the service out as opposed to having it in-house. Is that just for the fact that we don't have to hire our own probation officer, or are there also sort of liability reasons that we save money on that?
There are liability reasons. It's also a lot to do with the infrastructure of supplying facilities. It is a liability issue as well when you have someone on the payroll. When you contract out, of course, the company that you contract with takes the liability. Stacy can speak to that point, but there's a lot of different. There are a lot of things that roll into that actually affect the cost savings.
And is how many cities do they currently contract with in the state of Washington?
Here in Washington, I have 3 other contracts.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. TJ, can you tell me what are we currently doing? Because this is a new contract for us, so what are we currently doing with this?
It is a new contract. Currently, probation services are being performed by members of my staff and myself.
Okay.
At a very basic level. We can't do a lot of the things that probation officers actually do. We're not able to actually meet with probationers to do an intake process. We can't actually assist them in a lot of the services that a probation officer can actually assist them in. We can answer basic questions. We can process paperwork, but we can't go that next level that a probation officer can actually go.
So apparently there's 3 other cities that you're contracting with now. So some cities do hire probation officers. Is that the case? I don't know how it's handled in other cities. Sounds like it's fairly 3 cities isn't a lot compared to all the cities in the state. So is this a new concept that's coming, a new company or what?
No, it's not. Actually, Providence has been here in Washington. I've been with the City of Federal Way since 2001.
Okay.
We've had our contract with them.
Okay.
It's a new concept to Washington because most cities do have they have hired on a probation department.
Okay. In the statement here in the agenda bill, it makes a statement that because of this, the contract is structured to have no impact on court revenue. So I'm assuming that means we're not losing revenue that we would have brought, or we're not gaining more.
That is correct. Basically, right now, the model is that the judge assesses probation fees. Those probation fees are paid through the court into the general fund of the city. With the contract probation, the probationers will actually be paying Providence, and then Providence will remit a portion of those payments back to the city.
Okay. So is there an amount? I didn't. I may have missed it. I didn't see an amount in the contract per se. I guess we don't know how many of these situations we're going to have. Is there a not to exceed amount or amount we're trying to hit, or what's the case here?
With the offender self-pay probation, there's different levels. As of right now, I believe it's in the contract, we decided on $60 per month for active offenders. Of that $60, $40 of it will remain with Providence. $20 per month would then, of what we collect, would then come back to the city.
Okay. So we don't have a budget number per se of revenue for this in your court budget?
Correct.
Okay. I was interested, and maybe the city attorney can address this. This is a different contract than we normally see for our city contracts. It's not on our normal format. Is there a reason why we're using this particular format, not our own, or?
Our own format, I believe what you're referring to would be our professional services template that we use. And we actually have a couple of those templates that we use. None of those are geared to public works type situations or community development type situations, and we adjust them to fit some other situations. But this is a very different type of service, and we probably could have made one of those templates work, but Providence had a template that they were using with other cities, and we vetted that very closely. I assure you, we went over it and back and forth to get it into a format that was acceptable to the city. So we started with their template, though.
So the liability of this program, or potential liability, is it less now on the city or more with this recommendation?
I think it's neutral, is how I would assess it. The liability of probation services has concerned me greatly, and part of the reason that we're going this way is because of those concerns about liability, the concerns about liability that I raised. And this was a solution that seemed to be as liability neutral as possible. We are indemnified and held harmless from the actions that Providence takes, to the extent that that's possible under the law. We did have WCIA
our insurance pool. The experts at WCIA review the provisions in the insurance that's being provided closely, and that was, frankly, one of the things that held up getting the contract finalized, was because we were going over that carefully and trying to make it as liability neutral to the city as possible.
Okay, great, thank you. And one last question, or comment. I see in here that one of the duties is to maintain a list of approved community service locations in the city. And I know the judge and I have talked about this before, but I worked in a city where we did use a lot of community services and really generated a lot of hours in the community of work and things. And in fact, on occasion, we'd find a great worker and we'd wind up hiring that person or something. So I think community service is a good thing in the city. So I'm hoping that can be something here that's encouraged a little bit more, and we can find some participation in that area. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Stacy, curious, how often do you have to meet with defenders, I guess? I don't know what the right terminology we should use to be correct, but
Offenders, defendants,
okay.
Clients is actually what we refer to them as. At the time of their intake, we actually do a level of supervision, their risk assessment. That tool then helps us determine how often we're going to meet with an individual. Could be anywhere from weekly to biweekly to once a month, to once they've successfully completed all court-ordered conditions, they'll move to an unsupervised, where we're just monitoring for no new law violations.
Okay, so how often do you picture yourself being up here in Bothell meeting with people?
We're going to make it a point to being up here twice a week.
Twice a week. And is it you or somebody else?
One of my employees, most likely.
One of your
I will be
employees.
here at the start of it for a while. But
Okay, good, to get us up and running. Well, I appreciate it. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So
I'd move the recommended action.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote on the underlying or recommended action to authorize the city manager to execute the professional services agreement with Providence Community Corrections for probation services in substantially the same form as presented this evening. And if the clerk can display, passes unanimously. Thank you, TJ and Stacy. Appreciate your presentation this evening. Next item on the agenda is AB 1512, consider approval of transportation impact fees. And looks like Don Feen is going to be leading us in discussion. Don, good to see you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. And this is the meeting on the Transportation Impact Fee Program update. To recap from our previous meetings, this program was previously updated in 2008 and 2011. It's a Growth Management Act requirement, and project construction costs have changed due to inflation and changes in scope, and new projects were added. And the summary of the changes once again, and the bottom line is the according to the study, the cost per PM peak hour trip for the impact fee goes up from $57.40 to $68.65. So at our November 4th, 2014 meeting, staff presented the Transportation Impact Fee Study recommendations. Council asked for information on the total impact fees, which would include fire, parks, transportation, schools, and municipal comparisons. And then on December 2nd, 2014, staff presented those impact fee comparisons. During the November session, the questions that came up were why was there such a large increase, so we went over that and discussed the large transportation projects primarily associated with the downtown redevelopment. We also presented the fact the impact fees are the largest source of local funds since the Auto Tab initiative was passed. We provided the comparisons with comparable cities, which showed that Bothell was in the lower third overall, and we reached out to the development community regarding the increase. 41 letters were mailed out. We received one response from the master builders of Snohomish County. And the outcome of the December meeting was the council requested information on various impact fee increase alternatives. And here's the impact fee alternatives, kind of on a graph. The full increase was implemented immediately. For the full increase this year is the one up above. Then we have a 2-year phased increase, a 3-year phased increase, and an alternative that where it was increased by 10% and then by inflation thereafter. And then there's the existing impact fee with no increase. I also provided a chart that shows the revenues that would be collected in the next 5 years based on the average amount of trips that have occurred in the last 8 years, which is 273 per year, and how much revenue we would generate based on all the different alternatives, and how much we would lose compared to the full increase. So that was provided as well. With that, I'd be willing to entertain any questions. Staff still recommends the full increase, and I'd recommend the effective date of March 1st, 2015.
Great, thank you, Don. Any questions from council?
I have a couple questions.
Sure, Councilmember Lamb.
So, Don, could you go back to the slide of the 2011, the increase to 2011 to 2014?
Is that the...
It looked, I think it was $134 million in 2011 was the program, and then $162 million in 2014. Which I think is an increase of about 21% from 2011 to the proposed program. Is that right?
Yes.
So in July of 2010, our fees, since July of 2010 to this proposal, they've gone up 75% to this proposal. What's the gap?
I do have a good graphic on that from the previous presentation. Find it.
Because in July of 2010, the mitigation fee or the transportation mitigation fee on a single-family home was $3,637, and the one that we're proposing is $64, or the one that staff is proposing is $64.94, which is an increase of 75%, or 15% a year from 2010 to 2015.
If I had to give a quick answer, I would say it's a lot of the projects involving the downtown revitalization, the Wayne Curve, Crossroads, in the future Wayne Curve Phase 3 and Multi-Way. There was an update, the last update that was done, it was a phased increase over 3 years, and that's how it was implemented. But this is the graphic that shows how it was done. And the bottom line is there are more projects to fund. There's and much more costly projects involving projects that are important to the downtown revitalization.
And so the last time I asked, we discussed somebody who was, because this is applied to all sort of new businesses as well as tenant improvements. Is that right?
Yes, anything that generates additional trips that will cause an impact on our roadways.
So if somebody has if somebody is relocating a business from one part of the city to another part of the city, what is the assumption from the city's standpoint? Let's say Applebee's decides to move into the new downtown.
And they already had a business in Bothell, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Just their other locations.
What's our assumption on the part of staff?
They would probably in that case, do a special, they can do a special traffic study that would show the complicated nature of it. And that they could get credit for trips for the existing company at the location they're moving to and see how much additional they're going to be charging. But there's more complication with the fact that they had an existing. You had something on it?
I can help answer the question.
Oh, okay.
So if somebody relocate from one location A to a location B, that same business that goes to a second location, if that building that they built is a brand new building, they have to pay impact fee on the brand new building. And the reason is because on building A, someone else would be occupying it. So you're not vested as the business, but the building, the property has already mitigated the impact. So if you've paid the impact fee on that property, then any business that go into that building, if they do not produce new trips, then you do not have to pay impact fee on that existing building. In other words, if Safeway in downtown moved, the new Safeway is a brand new building, that's a new impact on the business, on that property. So there will be a new impact fee assessed in the new Safeway. If somebody else were to move into the current Safeway, they would be credited on the existing Safeway trips that was originally there.
That's a fascinating example, because in that case, that would lead to an absurd result. Because Safeway, if you follow, Safeway is no longer in downtown. Safeway moves up to the counter, so the number of trips that were there are going to be at the Safeway. Are you saying that if a new person comes into Safeway, and it's proposed right now to be a shag, and builds a shag, they get credit for the former Safeway's number of trips on a...
That's correct.
Okay.
So because there's existing trips that's already in the system that has already paid for it, so they get credited for that.
Okay. So how does that work for tenant improvements on an existing building?
In the case of a tenant improvement, and a good example would be, let's just say we have Safeway there. And let's just say that same building, Costco moves in there. If Costco that moves in there will be credited on the Safeway level, but if Costco had an increased traffic due to the type of business, they pay the increase between Safeway and Costco. So that's how we will treat it.
So let's
any new trips, basically any new trips for that business, for that building, will be assessed on an impact.
So if you're an existing building, if you're moving in, let's say like in the business park, right, and a company says, you know what, I'd like to relocate to Bothell. They come into a building that's currently vacant and do TIs and put their company in that building. Or it's a company that is currently at a building, they just do TIs because they want to upgrade their space. Are they charged a traffic transportation mitigation fee?
Only to the extent if they bring additional trips that wasn't there before.
But is the burden on them as a person doing a TI to conduct a traffic study? If I say, like, you know what, I'm going to remodel my space in my business or our corporate headquarters, do I have to pay for a traffic mitigation study to show that there's not additional trips, or show that there are?
In that case, a good example would be that in that case, in our current code, we classify as an office. If it's another business that's office, they are the same classification, so there's no impact. But if it's an office and they convert to a retail, as an example, you change the classification of an office to a retail, and you increase the trips because, again, we're talking about assessing impact fee based on the impact that business will generate beyond what was already approved.
So if I'm, and I'm sorry to spend so much time on this, but I think it's important for new businesses. So if a new business moves in an office use into an existing building, and the landlord, as is usually the case, does tenant improvements for that, they don't need to do any transportation analysis, whatever, if they're replacing another office use.
That's correct.
And the same would be true of somebody who currently occupies a building who does TIs. Transportation mitigation is not part of that.
That's correct, because they don't produce additional trips to the system.
Did you want me to yield?
Yeah, curious how this applies, because I've got called in to have a conversation with Panasonic Aviation, who got their permit held up at the last minute, says they wouldn't be able to get it unless they paid $45,000 in traffic mitigation fees. They didn't want to fight it. What was the story there?
That's
they're moving.
Excellent question on that. So in the case of Panasonic, the existing building was in light industrial.
So they're changing.
So
it
light
into
industrial use and office use has a difference.
Interesting.
That's kind of why does this subtle, why is the TI some of them don't have to pay, and why some TI has to pay. And the example I'm giving is, for example, if it's Safeway and Costco moved in, there's a different trip generated between that type of business. And so there is a different impact on that. So in that case, there is the increase. We're not charging the whole thing, we're charging the increase, the additional trips that this particular use will generate.
Okay,
that
great.
is not the same as before.
Our city attorney, Joe Beck, wanted to comment.
I just wanted to highlight one thing. Part of your question was about somebody at the last minute being charged a fee and not wanting to hold up their project. We have a provision in our code for payment under protest and the ability to appeal after you've received your permit. So nobody should have to be held up from finishing their project.
Perfect. Thank you.
So it's how we treat, impact. That's why it's an impact fee, and it's within the GMA, I mean the Growth Management Act, and how impact fee legislation has been put together that gives the city the authority to charge only additional impact, not existing. So that hopefully that helps.
Thank you for answering questions. It's interesting. Are you able to take your credits with you? Say when Safeway moved from downtown, they built the new building. Are they able to take those credits so any new tenant that came in would have to pay for the traffic impact fees, or, as is the plan, shag the building, be torn down and start anew? Because then Safeway, my concern is if we don't give them the credit, not like it's going to stop a project, because overall for the cost of a project it's not a determinant. But I would like to see that businesses are looking to improve on themselves, and like Safeway did, went from downtown, went to a new location. If they were able to take those traffic impact fees and say we're doing the same business up the street, that'd been interesting. Do we have that ability?
No.
Would that be helpful to, say, a business like Safeway, or, I don't know, Toshi's Teriyaki that wants to expand their site, but they can't do where they are, but they want to move a block over?
The problem on that scenario would be then the current Safeway, where they already mitigated the impact.
Mm-hmm.
So any business that moved in there that is similar should not be assessed. Otherwise, we'll be assessing, the same property owner in the current location because the building. Now, and you have, it's the same thing as we look at City Hall or whichever property it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that building is already mitigated its square footage and the type of use currently it's there. So just because someone, that business moved out, the property owner has already mitigated that building. So it's the same. And that creates a problem for us because then we would.
Then you have to track it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, it's not only tracking. Then the existing property owner, now you have to charge the existing property owner twice.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Eddie. I yield the floor back to you that I took.
So I just have one, and I mean, on the Safeway example, I guess what's odd about that is that Safeway is the property owner. Is that Safeway owned the property and then sold it to somebody else. So
They sold the rights.
essentially, yeah, they didn't just sell the rights, they sold the property. I mean, they sold the real property there. So it's odd to me that then that new property owner who has no economic connection to Safeway other than that they paid money to get the land is receiving the benefit of something that Safeway, who is now since departed and built a new facility. I'm not sure that's the most logical, and especially because that new use, it means that new use won't be paying for the entirety of its impact. It still gets a credit back for what it did before. I mean, I understand your point, which is, I think your point is that there's a fair amount of complexity in trying to track a property owner from one to the other, but I guess it just seems like we're leaving, especially if that building is, which I think it is, it's not going to be another Safeway. It's going to be a development that'll have a different impact. that's odd to me. And it might completely be subsumed in, you might get a new apartment building or a shag senior residence. That might have less of a traffic impact after a study than Safeway, and so they might not have to pay anything in transportation mitigation fees, which seems like an odd result to me. And that's, I guess, what my confusion. I didn't mean to say it was absurd, but it seems to me that that's kind of an unusual result where Safeway has to repay or pay again to move their business within the city.
So a good scenario on that would be, I mean, I'm thinking out loud here, a good scenario, if I were Safeway property and I was going to move, and I wanted to protect my investment on the current property, when I sell it, I would probably negotiate with the property owner for the property owner to pay my impact fee that I'm moving over there. So I think it's a private arrangement at that point when you sell the property. I suppose you could structure a sale to protect that.
No, yeah, no, it's just it's an interesting conundrum of just following like the use as opposed to the building or the construction. But I appreciate you answering the questions, and thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Councilmember Evans.
So looking at the chart here, I guess this was provided by Master Builders, it talks about a peak hour trip for residential or multifamily. What do we estimate are the number of average daily trips that a residence generates?
Single family resident?
Yes.
For PM peak hour.
And do we always look at the PM peak hour?
Yes.
Because that's the highest.
In Bothell,
okay.
we look at the PM. I think I believe it's less than one. There's a number of because the peak hour is
So typically on a single family, the IT says that you generate about 10 trips per day, and the peak hour is 0.9.
Of those 10 trips, 0.9 or one trip is during the peak hour.
So it's about 0.9 for single family.
Okay. So when we say for Bothell, it's $5,481 now for a peak hour trip, we're talking about one trip. That's what the fee is based on, one trip during the peak hour.
Right, one peak hour trip.
Okay.
And so the single family would go up to $64.94, but the cost per trip is $68.65 because it's pretty close. It's, like Eddie said, it's 0.9 for a single family.
So per PM peak trip, additional would be about $6,865.
68.65.
6,865. So for a single family, they'll be paying about 57.
No, $64.94.
$64.94. So it's about 0.9 of that.
Based, okay.
Might be 0.95.
Yeah, a little over 0.9.
I noticed in some of the other jurisdictions that you gave comparisons of, they charged an administrative fee. Is there an administrative fee on top of the impact fee in our city?
We do.
So how much is that?
I don't recall. I think it was 3%.
That's the standard one they have for all community services, right? There's
yeah, that's an administrative fee about 3%.
I think it is 3%.
Okay. We were, and the last time you discussed this with us, we were in the top third comparisons with other cities. I'm just wondering if any of the other cities have taken action on any of their fees now to raise them. And it looks like the Everett fee went from $900 to $4,988 or something.
I think we're in the top third when you look at transportation. We're in the bottom third when you look at overall. Are you talking about?
Okay, yeah, I was talking about transportation. So we're in the top third. That's what your proposal or your analysis was last time, and that's...
I know that Kirkland's updating theirs. Bellevue has updated theirs. I think one other city below us, but I'm not sure which one is updating theirs as well.
So we don't have any new updated numbers there then?
Not yet.
I noticed.
Mr. Evans, are you referring to the master builders list that's for Snohomish County, showing us second under Linwood?
Well, I think I was looking at our staff proposal, but I also looked at that information too. So I know Redmond is, I saw something, I think it was in the master builders here, where that was $7,024, but that may have been in the right downtown core or something, I don't know. Anyway, look, I saw some different numbers here in the master builders information versus what you had provided. I didn't know if we'd updated any more, updated this current information anymore. And it was interesting, when you provided all the fees to us, and I looked through it, even the master builders information, our park impact fees are low, low, low. So this process is only updating traffic mitigation fees, and I believe, is there a study this year to look at park impact fees? I thought I saw that somewhere on the, there is? Okay, great. We had asked the staff to come back with some proposals or some different alternatives, and one was the CPI that we added in. And I guess as I look at those rates, even going up under just the CPI, well, let's see, we go to what? We're at 60, the new rate is 68 or 60, for 68, 65 is what staff is recommending.
Per peak hour trip.
In 2015, and in 2016 that would go to 7,002.
That's based on a 2% inflation assumption.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess my concern is that, and I don't know if it's possible to do this because I know there's a lot of work goes into this, but I almost think, depending on what happens in the economy and things, I almost think we need to look at these fees annually. And maybe it's CPI, maybe it's not CPI, maybe it's something less than CPI. So I don't know what the plan is. Do we bring these back each year, or do you do this every 3-4 years?
By code, it can be increased by staff by 2%, but I imagine that could be brought to council somehow, but I'm not sure how that would. I think right now the way the wording is, the staff could increase it by CPI. But I believe we could, an alternative would be to bring it to the council with the other annual updates with the.
Well, we are high now, or we look like we're going to be high with the proposal. But as these other cities move along, I don't know where we'll fall in at that particular point. But that answers my questions for right now. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Sandberg?
I'd like to move the recommended action.
So we have a motion and a second. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah. I think that the staff has done a great job. They hired a terrific consultant that underdid a rigorous study with traffic modeling that included capacity enhancing projects from our CFP that this council approved. Went through growth projections and traffic forecasts, an analysis of how to equitably allocate costs. And they did that and arrived at an impact fee schedule that I think reflects the costs that we need to recover through a traffic impact fee program. I think it's interesting that staff emailed 41 developers, and the only response we got was from the Master Builders Association. And typically I would think that when you email people and say, we're going to raise the cost of you doing business, we would get more response. And so I'm heartened to hear that we didn't get an outcry from that. I interpreted the numbers a little bit differently than Councilmember Lamb. When I looked at the old ordinance for the traffic fee update that we did back in 2011, I was struck that the impact fees increased from 2010 to 2012. They increased by 50%, whereas the increase that we're proposing here is only 18%. So I think that's a modest increase. I think that if we don't adopt the staff's recommendation and we choose some other option, staff did some analysis that showed that we would have 5-year loss of revenues anywhere from $135,000 to almost $1.9 million. I think if we deviate from staff's recommendation, then we need to identify where that money is going to come from, where that lost revenue is going to come from. Is that going to come from local capital costs that tonight we just dedicated to streets in the North Creek Business Park? Is it going to come from the general fund? So I think that, I guess in summary, we have a very robust report before us with a lot of justification for the traffic impact fees that are proposed. We have a very aggressive capital facility plan. It's one that we adopted with projects that we added to. That's what causes the increase in cost of the traffic impact fees. And I think collecting any less than what the study shows us puts us at a revenue deficit that we have to make up someplace else. And so I think it's fair to ask for growth to pay for itself, or at least pay 25% of the identified road costs that the modeling provides.
Councilmember Evans.
As I understand it, these fees are driven by our projects, essentially. And we went through a period in time in the city where we weren't doing a lot of street projects, and now we're doing some major street-in projects, and it's costly. So that's what's driving this fee. It's not a number that it's a number that's substantiated by the projects and the cost of those projects that we're doing. It was interesting in the master builders information that they provided. They realized that there are impacts to the infrastructure with new development, but yet they didn't offer an alternative to how we assess fees or what the fees should be. They expressed concern in the increase, but they also acknowledged that the impact is going to be there. There is going to be an impact on the infrastructure. And that this cost is carried right on to or passed right on to the purchaser of a new home, and your home's going to go up by this amount as you buy new homes or whatever the case may be. And it was interesting. I stopped by a new plat here in the city this weekend and looked at some of their homes and just was interested in the development, that type of thing. And their homes were selling very quickly, surprisingly, in the $500 to $700 to on up price range. It was amazing that they were surprised how fast the homes were moving. So none of us want to pay that increased fee, but apparently someone is able to pay them, and those that can't pay that, obviously we have to drop down to less valued home, our starter home or whatever the case may be. At least if I understand it right, we do not have an impact fee in this city or in the school district for school district fees. Is that correct?
I believe that's true.
In the city of Bothell, whereas some of the other cities did have an impact fee on top of their other fees and that type of thing. So for at least for this time being, we're fortunate that we don't have that school impact fee. of the 161 million or whatever it was, the city, through these impact fees, is picking up about 40 million of the cost of these projects, which is about 25%. So the other 75%, apparently, we go out and look for grants or other funding sources for those things, which hopefully we can pick those up, and that's great. So that 25%, from 2011 through 2014, we're going up about 20% in that 4-year period, and that's about 5% per year, which is a lot. But if you look at our capital, our infrastructure plan, our CFP, that increased a lot because of these bigger projects. So, and one last concern, I'm not only concerned about the impact on new residents that they have to pay on a home, but I'm concerned about the impacts on the residents that are here in the city now, who we hear, I'm tired of the traffic. There's too much traffic. Why do we have so much traffic here? And it's because we're growing, and I want to see those people's concerns addressed too, and I think we do that by increasing our new projects and things. So I appreciate the work the staff's done on this, and these fees are high. I don't think they're out of line in some cases to some of the other cities, and it's all based on the fact of the projects that we're doing. And there may come a day when these could go down. I don't know if that's fathomable in government or services, but potentially if we got all the roads built someday and all the projects were done, maybe we would have a smaller fee. That probably won't happen in my lifetime. So, but I guess it's always a possibility. But I appreciate the information the staff's provided, and be ready to vote on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans. Councilmember Lamb.
So I have an amending motion. I would like to move alternative 3, which is on page 131 of our package, and I'd like to make it effective July 1st of this year, which is what we have traditionally done on these mitigation fees.
Second.
It's on page 131.
142.
Alternative 3 is the 3-year phased increase?
Exactly, with CPI.
Want to speak to your motion?
I'll speak to the amending motion. We are talking about a mitigation fee that is, I think everybody agrees that the projects that we have are good projects. I think everyone agrees that we need to collect a mitigation fee. That's not up for debate. What we're talking about is the receiving end of that mitigation fee, and the current increase that's proposed by staff is a 75% increase from 2010, and that's not just on new single-family homes. It goes to new businesses as well. It goes to old businesses that are relocating to a new building, and I think we need to look on the receiving end of that. It was said tonight that an 18% increase is relatively modest. And I guess I would submit if you've run a business or owned a business and had to absorb costs that are passed down from government, an 18% increase isn't modest. And I think we in the city have a tradition of pushing a lot of our expenses onto businesses. We lost our streetlight fund, which used to be paid across the board, and so you can't collect that anymore. That fund is now 100% replaced by a tax on businesses and business fees. We also had garbage rates that came in. The current provider that was chosen had the highest rate for residential garbage rates. But we directed staff to say, you know what, rejigger that so that business pays more than what it costs to collect their garbage, so that residents who use garbage just as businesses do will pay less. We have a habit of doing that, and so we pushed a lot of taxes onto the business community. And the reality is, if it wasn't for our business community, our city wouldn't be what it is today. No one here, the argument that we're having tonight is not, it's basically over which extraordinary increase are we going to pass on to new businesses, and which extraordinary increase are we going to pass on to, those people. We're not asking citizens to pay this. We're asking businesses to pay this. That's appropriate. It's part of the law, and we're doing it. I just think that adjusting it in, which would be a cost of roughly, I think it's $60,000 a year, which is half of what our property taxes increased the revenue simply by appreciation of property values last year. We had $120,000 in revenue. I think it's a very modest adjustment. And the reality is, a comment was made. Well, the only comment, no builders individually responded. It was just the master builders who responded. The master builders is the trade association for residential developers. That's exactly who one would expect to respond on behalf of residential developers rather than individual residential developers. There's nothing remarkable about that. As a matter of fact, that is their trade association. That's how they generally interface with local government. So I think it pays to listen to that. I think that option 3 is still providing a robust growth. It is providing a catch-up. By 2019, it'll be identical to the staff presentation. It simply allows the business community to adjust to that and to receive significant increases every single year, but not to get, not to have an 18% increase in year one. I think that's a fair proposal, and I think that the costs over time, and it was said it's lost revenue. Lost revenue is also taxes that are still sitting in the pockets of business people that they can do other things with. It's important for us in government to remember that whenever we take a tax, it's not free. Even if you don't own a business, that tax comes from a business owner, and it's money that they can't use to hire somebody, to do improvements, to spend, in our community. That's money that we take away from them. What this proposal is, my amendment is a significant increase in those fees on businesses to pay for growth, but it simply phases it in over a few more years, and I think that's appropriate.
Councilmember Sandberg.
I'll be voting against the amending motion. I would like to point out that the 5-year potential lost revenue from Alternative 3 is about $270,000. That's $270,000 that we are going to have to come up with from some other means. And it was stated that we keep going to the business community. I don't know if members of this council were the ones who voted to increase taxes on the business community to make up for the revenue shortfall in the streetlight fund. But I do know that there was a council member who directed the rejiggering of the garbage contract to put more of the emphasis on our businesses. So I think that when you look at the sum total of the impact fees, the impact fees are probably felt strongest in the residential sector. And like I stated before, we had a study, we commissioned a study to allow for cost recovery of 25% of these capacity enhancing projects. And if we don't collect the money from traffic impact fees, we have to come up with it from someplace else. And I don't think that we should consider $60,000 of property tax increase from our existing residents to be a good source to cover that shortfall. The cost of traffic impact and transportation impact should come from new development.
Councilmember Evans.
I think one thing that needs to be kept in mind here is that we're going to be looking at the park impact fees. And if you think this is a big impact, I can anticipate that what's coming for the park impact fee is even going to be larger. Mm-hmm. So now the residential and the business sector is going to be hit again for those fees going up significantly. The $60,000 per year that we potentially lose over the 5 years can be made up through increased assessed valuation, can be made up through additional new businesses in the city, potentially. I'm not saying that it will. Whether or not it comes out of the $60,000 of assessment on our existing properties, I don't know. I mean, I think there are other alternatives to make that up. I think $268,000. I think this is a fair compromise. I understand the business side of it. I understand the residential side of it. I understand that this is a significant increase, and it's triggered by these new projects. And so we're talking about a compromise here, phasing this in over a 3-year period, and the estimated cost or loss in impact fees is about $268,000. But there's a big impact on the other side of what we're paying for those people. I was ready to vote in favor of this existing fee tonight as proposed by staff, but I understand. I think there's a room for some movement here on this thing. The $268,000, while it sounds like a lot of money over the scheme of almost $10 million, I'm guessing that could be made up in other areas as this city continues to grow.
I find it an interesting argument that $268,000 is lost revenue. Actually, there's a potential that we lost $1 billion in revenue. I mean, it's how we use our words, right? It's not lost revenue. We're increasing the revenue coming to the city if we put this increase into place. We're adding millions of dollars to our traffic impact mitigation. It's not that it's lost revenue. We're increasing it. We're increasing revenue. So it seems odd that we're complaining about $268,000 when there's millions others generated by increasing it by 17% or 18%. It's a big increase. It's a huge increase. And based on the back of what already happened from 2010, it's a earth-shaking increase. And it seems that in this city we're addicted to continuing to increase our fees as if it doesn't have an impact on the citizens in our city, because it absolutely does. Who here thinks that this fee doesn't ultimately get passed down to the homeowners? Who here, and it goes beyond just the single-family fee, it goes to multifamily and all the way down the line for increased costs of services to those folks that are within our city, even at furniture stores, at car sales, at pharmacies, and on down the line. We're pushing people out of what is a dense developed area, or could be dense developed area, putting them out toward, let's see, Marysville, further out, because that's where they're able to afford. So I think by increasing fees, not just these but others, we have to keep in mind that it does cause sprawl. And if you don't think it does, you have to consider people's pocketbooks. There's plenty of studies that talks about when the cost of a home has increased by $1,000, and even I think master builders presented that to us priorly, and it's within our agenda packet if anybody wants to read that. $1,000 has an impact on families, significant impact. It doesn't allow them to purchase at a certain levels and pushes them out to different cities where potentially maybe we want to have those people within our city and part and members of our society. So this is a compromise that I appreciate Deputy or Councilmember Lamb, putting before us this evening. So I will be voting in support, and I don't see this as lost revenue. I see it as an increase in revenue as I consider budgeting. And a 17% increase in any line item in my business is a significant one and not one to minimize. Deputy Mayor, anything?
Not at this moment.
All right. So if everybody could place their vote for the for the amendment. Clerk can display. It passes 4-2. So we have I lost my list. I think Councilmember Sandberg. Well, it kind of starts again. So we have a changed underlying motion, and so the floor is open for deliberation again in regards to the changed motion on the floor, if that makes sense. Anybody want to make comment? Any other changes?
Will you restate the motion on the floor now?
The motion is the recommended action was changed by a motion in support of the majority of council to go with option 3 and to implement that fee change starting in July of this year, per is historically done on page 123, shows that July 1st, 2010, 2011, 2012 is when the effective date of past fee increases were put into place.
So if the underlying motion is now to accept alternative 3,
Yep.
I will be voting no.
Okay.
I don't believe that collecting the impact fees as identified by staff and the consultant is harming the consumer, as evidenced by the construction boom that is going on, not just in Bothell, but this entire area. So I think it is important for us as policymakers to collect the revenue that is identified and not try and make that up in other areas when we have a solution before us. And if we're going to rely on increasing assessed values and that sort of thing, why not put that towards street preservation and other projects that citizens have identified that they want, as opposed to saying, sorry, there's no money. There's no money for sidewalks. There's no money for crosswalks. There's no money for fixing your street. Because every time we lose this opportunity, then someone else, and it's the existing citizens that pay for it.
Didn't you vote against street preservation this evening? I thought you did.
I made an amending motion to, if you will remember, to use part of the funds for that street preservation and identify other projects in the city, more needier projects, for pavement preservation.
I guess I recall the vote differently. I think it was 5-1 for street preservation. Any other comments on the underlying motion?
I'll be supporting the underlying motion. I think it's a responsible compromise. You know, the vote tonight effectively increases taxes on business, and I think if you've run a business and if you've had that responsibility and understand when government pass cause, you can't just look to business always to raise more money and say this is. I mean, as a business owner, you don't have the opportunity to turn around to other people and to say, I'm just going to raise my prices to match my underlying needs. You have to meet the demand. Government has the ability to impose taxes and fees on businesses. This is a fee that we are imposing on businesses, and this is a dramatic increase. What this will include is about a 15% increase per year, which from what our readings on CPI, this is about 7 times the rate of inflation every single year that we're going to be asking businesses to absorb. That is unless you've never been involved in running a private enterprise, that is not an insubstantial increase. That's something that they have to then budget for, and it's something that hits new businesses and new enterprises the hardest. But I think this is a reasonable compromise. I think it's one that people can support, and I think it was said tonight that residents pay property taxes. Well, actually, businesses pay property taxes too. Not everyone who owns property in the city of Bothell lives in the city of Bothell, and some of our largest property tax payors are businesses who don't reside here. So those people contribute utility tax, property tax, now transportation mitigation fees, other taxes and fees. At some point, we need to say, yes, we're going to increase those, but it's going to be a more modest increase. I'm happy and I'm comfortable to sit with the proposal that we have tonight. I understand that other council member, wanted to raise fees on businesses higher, but I think this is a responsible compromise, and I'll be supporting the main motion.
Okay, Councilmember Evans.
Mayor, I will be supporting the motion too, and I hope we talk about, not being able to do some of these future road improvements or sidewalks and things. And we've got a retreat coming up here where that's going to be one of the main topics that's discussed. And I hope that as council members, we come to that session, that retreat, with some recommended funding alternatives for these other projects and things that we need, rather than to just disagree with maybe what the staff, I don't know, I have no idea what they'll propose or not propose, but I think that the responsibility is on us too to find a way to fund these projects, because I don't know anybody, or there aren't very many people in this world that have an unlimited budget that someplace you don't have to cut. We all do in our personal budgets and things, but there's a lot of things we want, and I just really hope as we enter this discussion at our retreat that we talk about, okay, what are some alternatives for funding these projects, and what can we support and work on. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
I will not be supporting the motion. I think staff came up with a recommendation that was prudent. I just like everyone up here, does not want to overburden the businesses. And yet staff's recommendations, if I'm not mistaken, were to be implemented in March. Now we're setting it back to July. So we're not losing money. We're just not getting a lot of money. But I won't be supporting this motion.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor, any comments? Okay, so I guess my comment is the motion that is on the floor doesn't substantially change the overall picture. From my perspective, I'd rather not see an increase at all. Period. This definitely increases the current position for builders and businesses throughout our city. So what is an awkward position is two council members say that they want to see fee increases and are the ones more passionate about it than the ones that potentially would be voting yes to actually increase the fees. So what an odd position to be in. I don't want to see the fees increased. I felt the motion that was put on the floor was a very fair compromise. So it's a temptation for me to actually vote no, because then there would be no fee increase and this issue dies and we revisit for next year. So I have to contemplate this for maybe 5 minutes. As such, we're going to take a 10-minute recess or 15-minute recess and come back at 8 o'clock.